Alcatraz has earned a chilling reputation as the prison with no way out, one of the most heavily guarded and escape-proof facilities in the world. Throughout its history, 36 inmates tried to break free. Not a single one succeeded. Out of those, 23 were caught, 6 were shot dead, 2 drowned, and 5 just vanished into thin air. But there's one case that still haunts the records, the only known escape that actually worked. 2 brothers, John and Clarence, along with a man named Frankie Morris, pulled off what no one else could. To this day, no one knows what really happened to them. Did they survive? Did they drown? Or did they start new lives under different names? Today, we're diving into the mystery behind what's considered the greatest prison escape in history. So, why was Alcatraz known as the scariest prison on Earth? The name Alcatraz comes from a seabird once native to the island. But in 1934, the US government turned this isolated rock into a high-security federal prison, built to house the nation's most dangerous criminals, mob bosses, cold-blooded killers, and notorious bank robbers. Located just over a mile off the coast of San Francisco and within sight of the Golden Gate Bridge, Alcatraz was surrounded by freezing waters, deadly currents, and even great white sharks. There were no fences, no walls. The ocean was the ultimate barrier. But prison officials didn't stop there. They let inmates shower in hot water every day, not out of kindness, but to make their bodies so used to warmth that the icy waters would be unbearable if they ever tried to escape. Some prisoners who made the attempt had to swim back, unable to survive the 4 degrees Celsius, 39 degrees Fahrenheit waters. Others simply vanished. Despite the island's harsh conditions, no natural soil, barely any trees, constant fog, and treacherous tides, some criminals actually wanted to be sent there, hoping to boost their reputation inside the underworld. Alcatraz had no need for high walls. It was a fortress of rock, cold, and fear. A place with one way in and no way out. If you were sent to Alcatraz, it meant one thing. You were unmanageable, even by the toughest prisons in America. Inmates were ranked by behavior. The more well-behaved ones went to Block A. But those in Block D, they were considered beyond saving. Still, there was a system. Show genuine progress, and you could move up to better conditions, maybe even get transferred back to a mainland facility, and possibly earn a second chance. Alcatraz wasn't just a prison, it was a message. Nicknamed The Rock, it stood as both a fortress for the worst of the worst and a brutal warning to criminals nationwide. One of the earliest rules set by guard James Johnson was simple yet cruel: silence. Prisoners weren't allowed to speak, not to each other, not to guards, unless absolutely necessary. No news from the outside, no books. Even during visits, family members were forbidden from discussing the outside world. Every word was monitored. Break the silence? You'd be thrown into isolation. The silence drove many prisoners to the brink of insanity. One inmate, a gangster named Rupert Foon, reportedly crushed 4 of his own fingers with an iron bar, just to be transferred elsewhere. In 1937, the infamous silence rule was finally loosened. But its damage had already been done. The most feared part of Alcatraz was Block D, home to 42 punishment cells. Prisoners caught breaking the rules were thrown in, stripped naked, fed the bare minimum. One of the cells was pitch black, no toilet, no sink, just a hole in the floor. Inmates spent days in complete darkness, their senses deprived, sometimes up to 19 days straight. Ironically, some cells in Block D had small windows facing the San Francisco Bay, a cruel reminder of the freedom they no longer had. Over the prison's 29-year history, there were 14 escape attempts involving 36 inmates. None were successful. 23 were caught. 6 were shot and killed. 2 drowned. and 5 simply vanished without a trace. 16 years after the Bernard Coy era, Alcatraz witnessed one of the most legendary prison breaks in history: the mysterious escape of 3 inmates, Frank Morris and brothers John and Clarence Anglin. On the night of June 11, 1962, these 3 men vanished from their cells and were never seen again. To this day, the FBI's warrant for their arrest remains active. No bodies, no confirmed sightings. Just one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in American criminal history. Frank Morris, born in 1926 in Washington, D.C., had a troubled life from the start. Arrested at 13 for drug possession and armed robbery, he graduated to bigger crimes fast. At 18, just days after being released from juvenile detention, he committed a bank robbery in Miami Beach. He was sentenced to 15 years, but escaped after serving just 10. A year later, he broke into the mansion of a car industry billionaire in San Francisco, and that's when the authorities had had enough. Morris was sent to Alcatraz. Inmate number AZ-1441. Then there were the Anglin brothers, John and Clarence. Born in the early 1930s, they started young. At just 14, John roped Clarence into robbing a bank, but the plan flopped. The bank had already closed, the money was locked away, and the gun? Just a plastic toy. Years later, they tried again. This time, they targeted a bank in Columbia, Alabama. John got 15 years. Clarence, who carried a real Thompson submachine gun, got 20. Eventually, both were transferred to Alcatraz, becoming AZ-1476 and AZ-1485. But there was one more key player in this story: Allen West. Born in 1929, West was doing time for auto theft. He'd escaped once from a Florida prison, briefly, before getting caught and sent to Alcatraz as inmate AZ-1335. West became the inside man in the escape plan. He worked closely with Morris and the Anglin brothers, and their adjacent cells made it possible to communicate and coordinate, in secret, over many months. But when the night came, something went wrong. West couldn't make it out. The others left him behind. Ironically, even after missing out on the big escape, West was later arrested nearly 20 more times for theft and burglary. Some say he regretted that one night for the rest of his life. Still, the question remains: did Morris and the Anglin brothers actually survive the freezing waters of San Francisco Bay? Or did they vanish into the dark forever? The Alcatraz escape remains one of the most fascinating unsolved cases in modern American history. Despite countless leads, tips, and theories, the mystery only deepened over time. Did they drown in the freezing Pacific that night in 1962? Or did they live out the rest of their lives in secrecy, watching from afar as the world tried and failed to catch them? Whatever the truth may be, one thing is certain: they turned the most secure prison in America into the stage of a legend, and they left behind a puzzle that's still unsolved, over 60 years later. It's strange to think that behind the cold steel bars, the high security fences, and the legend of Alcatraz, there was once a quiet neighborhood, a place where children laughed, where families lived, where officers raised their sons and daughters, next door to some of America's most dangerous criminals. More than 100 children grew up on that tiny rock in the middle of the bay. They played baseball under the shadow of guard towers. They flew kites while their parents patrolled prison walls. They roller skated along the island's narrow paths, and when the sirens wailed, they ran. ran home. Because everyone on Alcatraz Island knew what that siren meant. Someone might be escaping. And yet, despite it all, many of those who grew up there remember it fondly. There were game rooms with jukeboxes and pinball machines. There were family dinners, movie nights, and a small schoolhouse where kids learned their ABCs just a stone's throw away from convicted murderers. Even the prisoners, in some strange way, lived better here than in other federal facilities. Hot showers, not for comfort, but to keep them from adjusting to the freezing bay waters, should they ever try to escape. Private cells, designed to reduce violence and control the chaos. And the food? Surprisingly decent. Bacon, roast pork, fresh bread. And inmates could eat as much as they liked. But don't let the warm meals fool you. Alcatraz was never meant to rehabilitate. It was designed to break spirits, to isolate, to contain, to remind every man within its walls that there was no place left to run. Yet, some did. And whether they drowned in the dark waters of San Francisco Bay or disappeared into legend, they left behind a story the world would never forget. A story that still echoes across the waves. Every time someone looks out at that lonely island and wonders, what really happened that night in 1962? And then, it all came to an end. On March 21st, 1963, Alcatraz officially shut its gates after 29 years in operation. The heavy steel doors slammed shut. The inmates were transferred. The guards and their families left the island. And one of America's most feared prisons became a historic relic. But Alcatraz never truly died. In just a few short years, this former fortress of punishment transformed into a top tourist destination. People came from around the world to see Cell 13, once home to Al Capone. They listened to stories of daring escapes and the strange life that once existed here. A place where prisoners grew vegetables, played chess, and gardened alongside the guards. Today, Alcatraz welcomes over 1 million visitors a year. They come not just for the stunning views of San Francisco Bay, but to feel something intangible. Maybe it's the echo of loneliness in those cold, concrete walls. Maybe it's the memory of the broken lives once locked behind bars. Or maybe it's the whisper of 3 men who escaped in 1962 and were never found. Because Alcatraz isn't just a prison. It's a symbol, a mystery, a haunting reminder of a question that remains unanswered. Did anyone ever truly escape from Alcatraz? Or has Alcatraz kept them here all along, just in a different way?